Welcome to Around Kansas. I'm Deb Goodrich.
And I'm Michelle Martin.
Coming to you this morning from the middle of the Kaw River. Is this not cool? This is the Bowersox Power Plant at Lawrence. And our friend Patrick Emerson, who is an amazing photographer, took this image. Normally, this would be under several feet of water, but they have stopped the river in order to work on the power plant. So that gave us a great opportunity to talk about the very historic Kaw River.
And I'm actually coming to you with a stereo card. This is from Alexander Gardner's photos taken in Kansas. And this is the ferry that crosses the Kaw River near Lakompton, a place very near and dear to Deb's heart and mine as well. And this is how you would have traveled across that mighty river in the 19th century.
Well, I really love it. One of the regular features we had when we were doing the Kansas Journal of Military History was about rivers. They're barriers and byways. And that's such a great way of looking at them because an important means of transportation, of course, water source for man and beast. So, and a source of energy, just like the power plant behind me illustrates. But you had to deal with them coming west. Whether you were crossing them or using them, you had to deal with the rivers. And of course, the Kaw, which has its confluence with the Missouri, of course, in Kansas City, and then, pours into the mighty Mo right there at Kaw Point, one of those famous spots associated with Lewis and Clark, has its beginnings in eastern Colorado. I have traversed the high plains back there trying to find the source. You follow the Smoky as far as you can go. And of course, the Smoky and Republican come together at Junction City, hence the name Junction City.
Junction City.
The junction of those two rivers to form the Kaw. But its story is just incredible. You cannot talk about Kansas history without talking about the Kaw River. And of course, the capital is on the Kaw. The territorial capital at Lakompton was on the Kaw. And Michelle, remember that, I'm trying to remember exactly how many, and I can't remember if it was Sonny Liebler who wrote about the steamboats, but there was an account of, was it 3 steamboats docked at Lakompton one day? Yes. And I know Mike Boss told me he'd always wanted to paint that if he could find somebody to commission it. Those steamboats docked at Lakompton. And then, of course, Manhattan was founded where the Hartford steamboat ran aground. And they were going farther upriver to establish a community. And they're like, well, this is fine. And they ran aground. Everybody got off. They unloaded their stuff. And then the captain's tower from the Hartford is part of, is it the Historical Society building there in
I believe so, yes.
Manhattan, I think. So just so many cool stories associated with the Kaw River.
Well, and then there are those eyewitness accounts of what the Kaw was like in the 19th century. I love, we have accounts from territorial settlers, perhaps engaging in a little hyperbole, but nonetheless stating that the Kaw was a place not only that people could traverse, but of course animal and beast of different kind, and in particular that in Kansas everything was bigger, everything was meaner, everything was nastier, including the snakes. And I love the eyewitness account of the snake crossing the Kaw, and I think that was right around Lakompton, and that the individual said that the head of the serpent was on the opposite bank. The body took up the entire width of the river, and its tail was still on dry ground on the opposite side. And that it took a great time to watch that beast go across the river. And of course, for me, that if I would have read that account in any Eastern newspaper, there is no way you would have gotten me to come out and settle near that river. If I read and saw snakes were that big, no way, not happening.
No,
Um,
no,
but you know,
no.
the Kaw also, especially around Lakompton, there were a lot of other little settlements. And over time, what I think is amazing and what this picture behind you shows is what happens when we interfere with the river's natural workings. And over time, between Army Corps of Engineers, between natural changes in the river, communities that were once there are gone. And one of those was the community of Douglas.
Mhm.
That was not too far, just a few miles outside of Lakompton, heading toward Lawrence. And we know a lot about what might have happened in Douglas through the letters of Oksala John Hoole back to South Carolina. He brought his new bride, Betsy. It was their wedding trip. Oh boy, I just got married. And what did I get? A trip to Kansas Territory. Ooh, boy. I bet Betsy was regretting that once they got there. But they lived in a small cabin in Douglas. And if you look at the maps, the old maps, it shows the Kaw, and then right there adjacent, you see the community of Douglas.
Mhm.
And you can see how it was gridded out, it was plotted out. It looked like it was going to become this really hot happening place. And of course, the territorial conflict saw that it didn't really grow as people had hoped. And then later on, the changing course of the river did away with anything that was left of Douglas.
Well, another community that's no longer there is Rising Sun, of course. It was right across from
Yeah.
Compton. And I do think that maybe some of the flooding affected the community, the red light district of Rising Sun. It was the happening place. Respectable people were over in Lakompton, and Rising Sun was the red light district across the river. And I'm sure the ferry was always working over there. But
I bet it worked double time going back and forth to get to Rising Sun.
Bet it did. And of course the flooding, you were talking about the Corps of Engineers, and there has been some prodigious flooding over the years. And one of the ones that I've taken a look at is 1903. And Congressman Curtis still lived in North Topeka, I believe, at that time. And they talk about, there's a story in one of the papers about his paying somebody to, I don't know, I'm trying to remember all the details of Charlie standing up, and he'd give $200 to anybody that would go. I don't know if it was rescue his grandma. I don't know, but none of it was true. None of the facts of this guy's story rang true when he was recalling the flood of 1903. It was like when you pick it apart, other than there was a flood in 1903, no other facts in the story were true. Mm-hmm. And which, but it was a great story. It was really a great story. And then, of course, the flood in 1953, was a really devastating flood.
Yeah.
And that was really the flood that did in North Topeka. It's just been in the last couple of decades that North Topeka has rebounded and rebuilt. And if you go into the Great Overland Station there on the north side of the Kaw River, there is a mark, where the water reached inside the station during that 1953 flood. So, and then when I first lived in Topeka in it was 93. So 1992, I moved to Topeka. So 93, we have those incredible floods along the Mississippi, the Missouri, the Kaw. And I was going to Washburn and working at Topeka Transit. And our bus barn, I was a dispatcher. Nobody could understand me, but I was a dispatcher. And thank God they knew where to go anyway. So we're there on the banks of the river. And of course, you've got the levee system now to protect, the town of Topeka from from flooding. But every day, my boss and city officials would be up on that levee checking it. And I'm telling you, it was like standing on jello. It was so scary. And we had a truck backed up ready to evacuate, given the word. And I'm sitting there thinking, if that levee goes, we don't have time to get in a truck. We don't have time to do anything. We're gone. And I remember standing up at this was the Missouri River, but up at Benedictine College, at Atchison, and looking out at the flooding, and it was water as far as you could see. Benedictine sets up on those high bluffs, but the Missouri side of the river is flat. And one of the ladies standing there when I was watching said she was standing there watching when that levee broke. And she said it was like just this little, she said you could just see that there was like a crack and then it was gone. It was like everything was covered in water. It was that quick. So I'm like, yeah, that wasn't real comforting. But
I growing up in Michigan, where the places that my family lived, we weren't close enough to rivers. But the community, my hometown of Galesburg, is right along the Kalamazoo River. And so in our community, we have stories of great fires and great floods that, fire would burn downtown, the outside fringes of town would normally get hit by the floods. But when I moved from Fort Scott to Bartlesville, my first summer, it was the summer of 2007, my first summer in Bartlesville, we had copious amounts of rainfall. As a matter of fact, I was at Lakompton participating in Territorial Days at Constitution Hall with our good friend Tim Ruiz. And Tim and his family, I would always stay with them. And so the day after, I was trying to get back to Bartlesville, and we'd had so much rain in Kansas and Oklahoma. When I got to Ottawa, I had to turn around because the river had flooded at Ottawa. And so parts of downtown Ottawa, Kansas were underwater. So the highway goes through. So I had to turn around and go back up. Stayed with Tim and his family another night, got up the next day and ended up getting on 35 and had to take that all the way down through Wichita, got into Oklahoma. And when you can get off at Highway 60 and head east toward Bartlesville at Tonkawa, when I got off, they had state troopers there and they were asking people, where are you going? And I said, well, I live in Bartlesville. I'm trying to get home. And the state trooper looked at me and he said, I'm going to radio out your license plate number. And he said, let me just tell you this, get back as fast as you can, because there are parts of Highway 60 that may go underwater in the next 4 to 8 hours.
Holy
and you won't be able to
cow.
get home. And because there are low-lying areas and there'd been so much rain.
Right.
And then he said, and by the way, when you get back to Bartlesville, just know you may not be able to get to whatever side of town you live on because there's so much flooding starting in downtown and across Frank Phillips and Adams Boulevard. And I said, well, how do you know all that? And he said, well, I grew up in Bartlesville. And he said, I know exactly where it's flooding. And sure enough, I got home. I did make it home. I did not stop for anything. I kept driving. I think I did about 75, 80 mile an hour all the way home. Pulled into my garage, went downstairs, and my basement had flooded. And I had about 2.5 feet of water in my basement. But then I started getting pumps running to pump it out. And then the Tulsa World called and said, hey, do you happen to be home? Can you cover the flooding for us? And so I was out in hip waders covering water rescues and then seeing the water advance in the community. And I don't think we give water enough credit for the intense amounts of damage that it can do. And what I think is amazing looking at that photo behind you is how much of that would be underwater.
Everything up to the base of the building, everything. Yeah. That's incredible.
And to think how they're having to engineer and hold that water back and reroute it. That is nothing short of amazing.
Oh my God. I wish this is when I miss doing radio and live interviews. I would so have engineers talking about this, because apparently there are coal veins that are running about a third of the river's water through them. It's it is an engineering marvel, the whole thing. So yeah, I find this fascinating, and I'm so thankful that Patrick sent this, because I think it's just an incredible image.
It's
and
beautiful.
He sent me a few more, and I thought, yeah, this is just a great time to talk about the Kaw. And one of the things, and when we come back here in just a minute, we're going to talk about catfish. And one of the reasons that I started thinking about catfish is he was talking about the people down here getting fish, the catfish burrow in the mud. So they're down there picking up fish. And some of the fish are being relocated, and some are being relocated to frying pans. So and some are being destroyed. The invasive species are being destroyed, so it's this whole thing is just such a marvel, with stopping the flow of the river right there. It's oh my goodness, it's so interesting. So yeah, if you've got a river stopped in your hometown, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. And find out how they did it. Send us
incredible
pictures. It is.
Yeah, I think it's and I think too, for me, when I think about how they're stopping the Kaw, but I think about all of the history that transpired. I think about the way Native people used that river as a transportation conduit, how it provided a food source.
Yeah.
How it was so important to everybody's life. And I think we take water for granted. And especially having lived in Michigan and then Kansas and Oklahoma, and then I went to New Mexico, and the Rio Grande is, sometimes it flows in Albuquerque, sometimes it doesn't. But then you get to Arizona, where I'm at, and the only water I see most of the time flowing is going to be the fountains running in the swimming pool that recirculates water, or the canals from the Central Arizona Project. It's very rare. I go too many places where I actually see natural water sources running. And one thing that we are very blessed in Kansas is to have wonderful lakes and rivers that help to, sustain wild and human life. So definitely don't take those rivers for granted.
Folks, we'll be right back.
In 1821, a trade route was opened from Missouri in the United States across prairies and mountains to Mexico. In 2021, we will mark 200 years of epic conflicts and grand adventures, larger-than-life personalities, and sweeping landscapes. Join us on an historic journey. The Santa Fe Trail lives on.
Find us on social media or santafetrail.org. Welcome to the Western Kansas Wildlife Travel Center, right here in my hometown of Oakley, Kansas. We're the front door of Western Kansas, located on 3 main highways, I-70, US 83, and US 40. And all those roads lead to history, beautiful scenery, and adventure, no matter which direction you go. We now have an IHOP. That brand that you've trusted up and down the road in all your travels is staffed with local folks, real people, just like you and me, and we're waiting on you to join us. So for fun, adventure, fuel up, fuel your body, and let's have some fun.
Well, since we were talking about the Kaw River in our last segment and talking about people just going out and picking up catfish, So every fisherman's dream, this is what they go to sleep and lay their heads down and imagine themselves just walking along, picking up the fish. Well, I went back in the vaults because I knew we'd done a story about catfish. And forgive us because this one talks about fishing in the summertime. And I know that you all love to get out and fish in the summer, but I know a lot of you fish all the time. And this segment about catfish I thought was really fun. So Michelle and I thought we'd share that one again with you. And Michelle's got even other ways. You don't have to have a fishing pole. I hate fishing. I honestly I love being on the riverbank, but I do not have the patience to fish. So as evidenced by Michelle's photo, there are a lot of other ways to enjoy the water.
Well, and I think, I wouldn't put it past folks in their kayak or their canoe to maybe, find a slow moving spot, toss out a line, or take that net with you and net some dinner while you're floating the river. But this is actually the Kaw, and it is not too far from Lakompton. And it was a day when the river keepers were out enjoying the river, the wildlife, and maybe they took some catfish home for dinner.
Maybe they did. I want to thank Travel KS for the lovely photo behind us. Again, that looks like every fisherman's dream too, doesn't it? And that beautiful sunset pulling that big cat out of the water. All right, let's take a look at this one from back in the vaults.
Summer is synonymous with fishing. Even though folks do fish all year long, there's something about the lure of the lake or riverbank in the summertime that is hard to resist. Kansas waterways host thousands of fishermen and women each year, some looking to catch that record breaker, whether it be trout, crappie, bass, or a prodigious catfish. Catfish have fascinated me since I was a child. In the Virginia mountains, my daddy and cousin Larry, the fish whisperer, would leave out at night and set ley lines across the New River. They pulled monstrous catfish out of the water. Those cats had whiskers 2 feet wide, and their mouths and bellies looked big enough to swallow me whole. It made me think twice about sticking my toes back into the water. Some similar monstrous fish have been pulled from Kansas waters too, and Tim Lilly wrote in Game and Fishing magazine a few years ago that the Kansas River is home to some mighty big fish. The Kaw, as many Kansans know this river, wrote Tim, has something no other totally in-state river can boast: record-setting blue cats. The Missouri River, which serves as Kansas' northeast border with Missouri, has blues. In fact, Tim continued, it's a good bet that the huge blues that turn up in the Kansas River have journeyed upstream from the mighty Mo. It also has big flatheads and channel cats, but its waters are not totally contained within the Sunflower State's borders. The Kansas River is. More than any other fishery in the state, this meandering, generally off-color stream, with what some will tell you is a truly living nature, is home to a legitimate triple threat, monstrous examples of blue, channel, and flathead catfish. Tim went on to describe the huge fish, 80 plus and 90 plus pounds of blue cats pulled from the Kaw. Then there was a nearly 35-pound channel cat. With record catches like that, why isn't every angler headed for the Kaw? Well, you have to know what you're doing and where. Tim's guidelines in that article hold true today. Your best bet will be to take someone along who knows the river. When you can't do that, be as careful as possible and let someone know where you intend to go, how long you intend to be gone. There are stretches of the Kansas River where, if your boat were to run aground on a sandbar, they would seem as isolated to you as the Amazon and remote South America. And make sure you take a cell phone. And when you get that big cat, share it with us on Around Kansas. Not just the photo. I mean, when you fry that fish up, we want a taste.
It's Christmas in Lakompton, where thousands of antique, Victorian, and themed ornaments adorn 200 trees throughout the Territorial Capitol Museum. Open Wednesday through Sunday, the exhibit runs through January 1st. Spend the day and experience all the small town has to offer, both historic sites, shops, food, and wine. Merry Christmas from historic Lakompton.
Howdy, I'm Seth Hayes, and welcome to my hometown, from then to now. Council Grove has a rich history as deep as the prairie tall grass. Spend the day visiting 25 historic sites or explore the unique shops and restaurants, or mosey out of town along the Santa Fe Trail. You all visit my hometown, Council Grove, in the heart of the Flint Hills.
Okay, looks like it's time for our tour. Welcome to the Fort Wallace Museum. Here at the museum, you're going to find some really interesting stuff, like our replica stagecoach from the Butterfield Overland Dispatch. We've got facades from the fort buildings. We've got an 1870s flag. There's a plesiosaur that was discovered locally. We've got the Ray pump organ collection. We're a little bitty place with a great big story, and we'd love to have you.
Welcome back, and welcome back to the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Boyhood Home. And there is Michelle. That's a beautiful picture of the place Ike grew up. Isn't that pretty?
It's a beautiful photo, but it's a lovely place to visit. It's just
really
gorgeous.
Is. And we're so happy that they're open. And behind me is one of the memorials on the grounds of the Eisenhower Library. So I'm going to read you this from their website, because you know they had been doing a lot of remodeling and then reopened briefly and then shut down quickly because of COVID. But they are open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And remember, folks, wherever you're watching from, this is Central Time, for guests to explore the museum exhibits, campus grounds, and the place of meditation. Timed entry tickets are required and must be purchased online in advance. So if you plan to go, you're going to have to go online and get a specific appointment to be there. So, and of course, that's for, to control how many people are going through. Capacity is limited. No on-site ticket sales, none. Face coverings are required, regardless of your vaccination status. The research room, gift shop, and boyhood home remain closed. So that is the sad news. The educational programs are online, however, so you can watch on Zoom. They're still doing some terrific programming. It's sad that you can't go to the gift shop, but you know what? You can shop it online. So one of the ones that I really want, if you're making your list, the Christmas ornament that has the house in front of Michelle. It's got his boyhood home on it. Beautiful Christmas ornament. Books, there's just all kinds of things that you can go to the website and order. So I think that's the great thing about the internet, that we still have this ability to support an incredible museum, either by going in person or by shopping and sending Christmas gifts to that presidential history buff in your family, or maybe they're just an Ike buff, or whatever. I can't wait for the research room to reopen. There's some stuff I really want to look into there, but nonetheless, we're happy that you can see those new exhibits, because I am actually going to make an appointment to go, because I haven't seen the new exhibits yet. And I am so excited about that. So that's very good news.
Well, Deb, I have a long association with the Eisenhower in Abilene, because when I was in Kansas and was at Fort Scott Community College, I coordinated the District 2 for the Kansas History Day competition. And on numerous occasions, the State History Day competition was held at the Presidential Library and Museum in Abilene.
Yes.
And the first year that I had worked with the program, it's administered through the Kansas Historical Society. The first year I worked with the program, we had students from District 2 going to the state competition, and I was asked actually to be a speaker at the luncheon. And so I actually did a first person living history portrayal. So I actually have pictures of myself in my living history attire doing programs there at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. And it was absolutely a highlight. And it is a beautiful facility. And I remember walking through thinking, wow, when are they going to redo the exhibits? These are looking a little dated. And so I'm thrilled to know that they've been able to go through and rework the exhibits. And what that does, if folks aren't familiar, going through and reworking your exhibits in a museum gives you a way not to pull in repeat visitors. Deb, not everybody's like you and me, can go to the same museum 10 times
Over
in
and
a year
over
and
and over.
not and over and over and over and see something different every time. Most folks who go through don't spend as much time as history nerds like we do. But if you have people who come back occasionally, it's good for them to see new things or see things presented differently, reinterpreted. And when I say reinterpreting, I don't mean they're rewriting the history of his life and his work. It's, how do you go ahead and create materials that are fresh, that keeps the content, that connects Ike's life to Kansas, to the
Well, there's
nation,
always
to the
new
world.
information. There's just
Exactly.
always new information coming to light.
Yep.
And, and let's face it, Ike's life touched millions of lives. So there are so many ways to talk about Ike and his impact. So just an incredible figure. And we're just so blessed to have this incredible facility, in Kansas. Not every president has a presidential library.
Right.
And the fact that we've got this incredible facility is just really marvelous. And while we're on the subject of Ike, 100 miles away, you've got Truman. And that's an amazing facility that has been undergoing renovations as well. And it's just so exciting that, for people all over the country, you can come and visit basically Kansas City and come on out to Abilene. And you've got these two incredible presidential stories, two presidents who are so instrumental in the highway system. You've got Ike, of course, signs the interstate highway bill, but Truman was a road champion from his days as a commissioner back in Independence and always championed roads. And I just think, I think that's an incredible connection to these two men of two different political parties, different backgrounds. And it's but what a great connection. I-70, literally.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and not only that, these two men are connected. I mean, the war, World War II connects these men too. Here you have Truman, who assumes the mantle of power at the death of Franklin Roosevelt, and he has to now make monumental decisions that have the potential impact that are going to impact millions of lives. And you've got Ike, who is a commander on the ground in the theater of war. And so they're connected in that respect as well. And even though they're of different political persuasions, they both are men that they have to work together during the war to bring about the successful conclusion of the war. But they also have to go ahead and work together as they transition. We see different transitions from wartime to peacetime. And as we know, presidents often call upon former presidents for advice. And so, they've got to keep this, a cordial working relationship. And and they're both connected by the transportation system. So, but what I love is when you go to Abilene and when you go to the Eisenhower, you're then able to take in a whole nother aspect of Kansas's history, and that's its cattle trade era in Abilene, one of the end points for cattle trade, for bringing those herds up from Texas. along the Chisholm Trail, and bringing them into Dodge City, into Abilene and Wichita and other places to ship them east. And so Abilene has always been important to transportation because you had to have the rail network. You had to have that rail there in Abilene to put those cattle on and ship them to Chicago to market. So you can visit Abilene's cattle trade area. You can visit the Seeley Mansion. There's so many things you can visit and make an entire day of Abilene. They have really great shops and eateries in the historic downtown area. It's a great family city to go visit.
It really is. It really is. Any excuse to go to Abilene. And the antique store there behind Dollar General has some awesome vintage jewelry too. So I don't think this one didn't come from there, but I've got some pieces that did. That's the other thing about Christmas, Michelle. It's just a great excuse to wear over the top jewelry. You know what?
It is.
Yeah. Got a party? Yeah, we're ready.
Exactly. And just think it's also sustainable gifting, because instead of buying something that's newly manufactured that uses resources, we're buying something that is already made, that has had an interesting life, that now can have a new life. And I don't know about you, but when I put on vintage pieces like this brooch made into a necklace on a neck wire, I always wonder who owned it before me. How did they wear it? How did they style it? Was this a New Year's Eve? Was this, worn for New Year's Eve? Was it on someone's coat? Was it part of someone's bridal trousseau of jewelry? I always like to wonder who owned it before me.
Well, I wonder what kind of drink she had in her hand when she was wearing this. That's what I'm thinking. Was that
exactly?
It wasn't a Shirley Temple, I guarantee you that. It was
no,
more like bathtub gin.
And I'm sure there were probably quite a few people in that time period that made some good bathtub gin there in Abilene too. But no, folks, really, Abilene is a fantastic place to take your family, especially during the holiday season. One thing that our Kansas towns do very well is decorate the downtowns and their civic areas, their public spaces for the holidays. It is beautiful. The banners, the lights, the decorations. Definitely find some Kansas cities like Abilene. Go see the Eisenhower. Visit the local shops, the eateries, take in the sights, and enjoy a place like Abilene this holiday season.
For sure. And tell them Deb and Michelle sent you. All right, folks, we will see you again next time. Be sure to share this with your friends. And especially if you've got friends in Abilene, tell them that we were talking about them.
And it was all good.
That's right. It was all good. Until then, I'm Deb Goodrich.
I'm Michelle Martin.
And we shall see you somewhere around
Kansas.
Bye-bye.